There's something in psychology called the self-serving bias, which I also talk about in the forthcoming book. So the self-serving bias is a way that people navigate in terms of attributing successes and failures, be it in their lives or in the lives of others. So most people tend to have, and that's why it's called self-serving, they tend to have a rosy attributional style, meaning that if I did well on the exam, it's because I'm smart and I studied hard. If I did poorly on the exam, it's because Professor Saad is an asshole Jew, right? And therefore, successes are attributed internally, failures are attributed externally.
Our timing could not be better today. Professor Gad Saad is a visiting professor and global ambassador at Northwood University. He is a phenomenal intellect. But what I love about him, and what you will too, is the way he puts stuff. He's fearless. He is fearless. He is a great follow on X. He's written several books. We had him once before to talk about his book on happiness. The Parasitic Mind is the book he's most well known for. International bestseller. I cannot recommend it enough. It is so important right now. And he's got a forthcoming book called Suicidal Empathy, which talks about how we're so virtuous and empathetic that, you know, we feel sorry for people who are evil. It's as simple as that. We're going to get into it with him. He has been a massive critic of Justin Trudeau. So the fact that Trudeau stepped down today was perfect timing. He is a massive critic of suicidal empathy, which we'll get into. Think about that term and what it means. I can't wait for you to hear this. I absolutely adore this man. Where is his Nobel Prize? I think it's forthcoming if we get smart. Professor Gad Saad is next. Gad, welcome back. This is the perfect day to have you on. I know you're probably heartbroken by the news that Justin Trudeau is resigning. And as soon as someone is available to replace him, he'll step down. What does that mean in Canada? Like, how does that process work?
Well, first of all, he's irreplaceable. Yes. It takes a unique, narcissistic degenerate to destroy Canada in 9 years. So I'm unsure that we could ever top Justin Trudeau. But so the Liberal Party will have to appoint some person to replace him, because I mean, as you know, in the Canadian system, it's parliamentary. So you're not really you're voting for a party, and then the party has a leader. And so I'm assuming that whomever they decide to replace Justin Trudeau will be interim leader for, a couple of months. And then eventually a federal election will probably be called in spring, but who knows?
Well, and the conservative guy, Pierre Poilievre, am I saying that right, Poilievre?
I mean, if you said it in the French way, which is probably not the way he says it, it's Poilievre. But I'm not sure. Yeah.
Okay. He is running on the conservative side, right? Like, when does that election, here in the States, you know how it works. We have an election every 4 years. We know when it's going to be. Is it different in Canada, and how so?
Yeah. So, I mean, all of the machinations and what's going on with your dog that's barking? Is there?
He's really upset about Trudeau. He's sad because he liked getting free stuff.
Yes, exactly. So I think the way it'll happen, I don't know all of the mechanisms of how you'd call the election and so on, but the general timeline is that I think by this spring, there will be a federal election called, and then hopefully not only, I mean, Trudeau would be out, but you also want to get rid of the Liberal Party. Now, the rumors that I'm hearing is that they may have so few seats, given the kind of bloodbath that is likely to happen, political bloodbath, that who knows how many parliamentarian seats they will have after Trudeau's out. We'll see.
Yeah, you can't say bloodbath anymore without Nancy Pelosi running to the microphone and saying,
That's why I said political. That's why I used political.
Yes, he's promising violence and a bloodbath. That is also why the dog is barking, and I apologize. The timing couldn't be better. Okay. So I'm going to play you a little bit here, Gad, of today's announcement by Trudeau. Politicians love to do this. They love to walk out saying, we worked and fought for you every day, and we did it. Let's hear what he's claimed. Go ahead and roll that, John.
I've fought for this country, for you, to strengthen and grow the middle class. Why we rallied to support each other through the pandemic, to advance reconciliation, to defend free trade on this continent, to stand strong with Ukraine and our democracy, and to fight climate change and get our economy ready for the future. We are at a critical moment in the world.
He doesn't even sound authentic to me. He never has. But when you hear that, what is your reaction?
Michelle, I can't express, and I'm someone who has an ease with words. I can't express the extent to which I loathe this guy, because he possesses all of the most execrable traits that a human being can possess. He's a malignant narcissist. He is a megalomaniac. He is parasitized by every single parasitic idea that I discuss in the parasitic mind. So there is no redeeming quality that you can find in this guy. When it comes to the specific things that he says, complete hogwash, right? I mean, I'll give an example from my personal life. The amount of taxes that were stolen from me from the book royalties that were garnered from the parasitic mind, 99% of which were not generated in Canada. But Canada has a world income proviso whereby if I were to make money on Mars, if I were to go on that first rocket that Elon puts out to Mars, and I generate income in Mars, Justin Trudeau, the Quebec and the Canadian government would say, that's our money. So when you add up all of the money that was taken from me, it was about 58% just of my royalties, right? All of which were generated outside of Canada, right? Now, I would have to work as a professor for 10 additional years in order to make up the taxes that were taken from my book royalties. But he stands up and says, hey, we've made it better for everyone. No, what you've done is, because socialism is a parasitic Ponzi scheme, you need to take from the few really producing Canadians so that you could support the rest of the Ponzi scheme. So yes, there are tons of people who were, including him, who were able to go on $83,000 a night holidays that I pay through my book royalties. By the way, in Ireland, right? Ireland is not a bastion of great freedom these days, but in Ireland, they at least recognize that there is something unique about taxing book royalties, and therefore there are no taxes on book royalties, because that's part of the cultural heritage of a society. Imagine that you could tax my mind, my theories, my personal experience in Lebanon that I write about in this book. 58% of that belongs to Justin Trudeau, so I'm only 42% of a human being. So he can go to hell.
Yeah, it's kind of disgusting. I mean, it's not kind of disgusting. It's really disgusting. It is playoff time. It is now or never. Do not miss out on these last few weeks of football on Prize Picks. I love Prize Picks, and I'm going to go strong on the Baltimore Ravens this week against Pittsburgh. What? Talk about putting a rivalry in the playoffs. Don't miss out on the last few weeks of football action with Prize Picks, the best place to win cash while watching the playoffs. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks. And Prize Picks now offers MasterCard for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. Okay, this week on Prize Picks, I'm looking at the playoffs. I am going to go, all you have to choose is less or more of the numbers. So they've got Lamar Jackson, 49.5 rushing yards. I'm going more. And then they have Mark Andrews, the Baltimore tight end, 0.5 rush plus receiving touchdowns. I'm going more. I think he's going to at least have one. So that's what I'm going with. So there you go. Download the app today. Use the code Michelle, and it's Michelle with one L, Michele, to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. It's Prize Picks. Use the code Michelle, Michele, to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. How did he get by with this for so long? That's one of my curiosities. I mean, I remember one of the first times I have a recollection of Trudeau. He was wearing a T-shirt or a shirt that said "The future is feminine," which is one of those parasitic things you're talking about. Just one of these mantras that somehow seems to make him virtuous. But he continued. We know about the blackface incident. How did he get away with this for so long?
It's unbelievable. So I'm going to do a little, I don't know if I've done this the last time that I was on your show. Imagine that this memory stick is the cork of a wine bottle. Okay? So just bear with me. There's an Arabic expression that when I translate it, obviously, and most of you don't speak Arabic, it's getting drunk by simply smelling the cork of the wine bottle. Right? What that refers to the fact that you are of such weak constituency that you don't actually have to go through the effort of drinking the wine to get drunk. Okay, so now let me apply this beautiful poetic Arabic expression to how we choose our leaders, right? So now I'm going to get drunk, Michelle, by smelling the cork of Justin Trudeau. He's tall. He has beautiful hair. Look, I'm already getting wobbly. Are you seeing me? You see, I'm starting to get, okay?
I see
I'm
it.
getting wobbly, right? This hard effort of looking at what are the fundamental values that he holds, that would be too much effort, right? That's why I refer to most people as regrettably degenerate cognitive misers, which is a fancy professorial way of me saying cognitive miser is intellectually lazy. It's hard to think, right? So it's much better for me to smell. Look, now I'm going to smell the cork of Donald Trump. He's disgusting. He's gross. He's vile. He speaks in a cantankerous Queen's way. He's a brawler. Now, I may agree with every single one of Donald Trump's policies, as do many of my academic colleagues, but that would require effortful cognitive processes. Much better to simply get drunk by the cork of the wine bottle. So that explains how we get Trudeau for 9 years.
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's beautifully put. I do like that, that analogy very, very much as a wine drinker. I prefer to drink the wine actually, but it is amazing to me. And I feel like we go through this, you're an expert in evolutionary psychology. So this isn't new, right? I mean, this has been with us from the beginning of time?
It is. I mean, and there are two ways I can answer this. So number one, humans like to use, so I'm going to use here a term that was originally coined by Gerd Gigerenzer, a German psychologist, and his team, he was at the Max Planck Institute in Germany, talked about fast and frugal heuristics. Now, what does that mean? A heuristic is a mental shortcut, right? Fast and frugal heuristic means that it is fastly deployed, and frugal means it is cognitively effortless to deploy it, right? So now let's take this principle of fast and frugal heuristics and let me apply it to the context of Justin Trudeau or Barack Obama or Donald Trump. Using my emotional system to make these judgments is much faster than to engage my cognitive system, right? Because emotions are autonomically deployed, right? I can easily invoke my emotional system, and therefore I can arrive at a decision much more quickly if I only apply my affective system. Now, the problem with that is that for many situations, triggering my affective system makes perfect evolutionary sense. So, for example, if I'm walking down a dark alley and I see 4 young men loitering, that will trigger my fear-based response. Now, that makes perfect evolutionary sense in that context because I've evolved this emotional mechanism that hopefully confers a survival advantage to me. But if I apply the wrong system at the wrong time, so if I invoke my emotional system to choose a president or prime minister when I should have been invoking my cognitive system, we end up with Justin Trudeau for 9 years. So yes, it is part of our evolutionary heritage to sometimes misfire the incorrect system.
It makes me wonder how we overcome that or change that, because there aren't a lot of people who are willing to put in the work, right? I mean, especially we're getting dumber by the moment because things happen so fast via the internet, via our phones, our apps, whatever, that we prefer that. We just look down, experience the emotions, don't think. So this seems like turning this ship is going to be quite difficult. What do you see as the process? How does it start?
I always like to be optimistic. That's why, people call me the happy warrior. Even when I'm fighting very difficult things, I try to have a twinkle in my eye, try to be sarcastic, try to be humorous, which perhaps is even a defensive coping strategy, because you see all the insanity. If you don't laugh about some of it, you'd go crazy.
You would.
But I'm afraid to be a bit pessimistic in that I fear that it is an indelible part of the architecture of the human mind to forevermore succumb to a lot of these biases. So, for example, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, two Israeli psychologists, one of whom won the Nobel Prize in economics, and only one won it because the other one had already passed away, and you can't win a Nobel Prize posthumously. Well, Daniel Kahneman's research was basically to demonstrate that the human mind has these built-in cognitive biases, these errors that it consistently commits. Now, there are evolutionary reasons why these cognitive biases exist. So I don't think we will ever eradicate some of these faulty ways of thinking or lack of thinking, but hopefully people like me could be standing on top of the mountain, at least reminding you that beware of these cognitive traps.
All right. Well, and you've been doing that. One of the things you posted recently on X, you feel like you've been shouting into the wind. When we saw what happened in New Orleans a week ago, it's so tragic. And this brings me back to two different people, but let's start with our good friend Justin Trudeau. After the Boston Marathon bombings, he decided to be empathetic toward the two bombers.
Kind.
He's very kind. He's very virtuous that way. John, let's go ahead and play that sound from long ago.
But there is no question that this happened because there is someone who feels completely excluded, completely at war with innocence, at war with a society. And our approach has to be, okay, where do those tensions come from? I mean, yes, we need to make sure that we're promoting security and we're, keeping our borders safe and monitoring the kinds of violent subgroups that happen around. But we also have to monitor and encourage people to not point fingers at each other and lay blame for personal ills or societal ills on a specific group, whether it be the West or the government or Bostonians or whatever it is.
Let's stop it right there, John. It's almost too much to take. So we'll smile, right? Because we got to be happy.
My blood pressure just went up 20 points. Thank you.
Oh,
Michelle.
shoot. I'm sorry. I apologize. He was talking about the Tsarnaev brothers and that they felt excluded in some way.
Yeah. And the reason, forgive me for interrupting you, the reason why I had shared recently that clip is because I was including that quote in my forthcoming book, Suicidal Empathy. And so that's why it was top of mind, even though it had happened, a decade ago.
Well, the fact that it happened a decade ago and we're still here a decade later, it doesn't take long for these things to metastasize.
Exactly right. Look, so there are several ways I can answer this. There's something in psychology called the self-serving bias, which I also talk about in the forthcoming book. So the self-serving bias is a way that people navigate in terms of attributing successes and failures be it in their lives or in the lives of others. So most people tend to have, and that's why it's called self-serving, they tend to have a rosy attributional style, meaning that if I did well on the exam, it's because I'm smart and I studied hard. If I did poorly on the exam, it's because Professor Saad is an asshole Jew, right? And therefore, successes are attributed internally, failures are attributed externally. What I argue in suicidal empathy is that progressive castrated people like Justin Trudeau have a unique attributional style whereby the degenerate behaviors of others are always attributed internally. So those two brothers did what they did not because they had personal agency to read their Islamic book and decide that the best outcome would be to put those pressure cooker bombs and kill as many kuffar, infidels, as possible. No, you turn it inward. It's probably because we suck in the West.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
probably because we didn't create an environment that didn't cause them to be marginalized.
Right.
And therefore, by turning other people's orgiastic debauchery inward, then I'm truly someone who's empathetic, hence suicidal empathy.
When Joe Biden was running for president, and I remember this, how many people would say, "Oh, he's empathetic. I love that.
Yes.
I'm voting for empathy." And but I can't wait for your next book to come out. I mean, everyone should read The Parasitic Mind, but suicidal empathy could not be more timely. It's the same thing, and you heard it so often after October 7th of 2023. This is not the fault of the Palestinians. This is the fault of the Jews. They brought this on themselves. It's because of what they've done to Palestine that Palestine just reacted. And now the Jews are the horrible people because they're defending themselves. I mean, is that the proper comparison to what you just talked about?
I mean, absolutely. In this case, you're misdirecting. The target of your empathy is the wrong target. Rather than targeting properly the empathy towards the 1,200 people who were butchered and so on, you target your empathy to the ones who committed the act, right? So,
Right.
I mean, you don't want to marginalize the Nazis. Forget about those asshole Jews that were burned in the ovens. But it's the Nazis that are really deserving of our empathy, because not all Germans are Nazis, right? So, by the way, I should, and I'm going to give two very quick examples of empathy from my personal experience. So let me do that, and then I'll come back to a theoretical explanation of what suicidal empathy is. In, I think it was 2015 or 2016, every summer we go to Newport Beach. I used to be a professor at UC Irvine. I had family in Southern California, so it's like a second home to us. And I taught my children very early in life, unlike Greta Thunberg, who pretends to be an environmentalist, I actually engage in behavior that helps the world, even if it's in a small way. I would walk with my children and try to pick up litter from the beach. And I would always say, look, we just picked up 60 pieces of litter, which would have otherwise been polluting the beach had we not engaged in this small act of goodness. Okay. So at one point we were sitting at the beach and we saw this woman who had this plastic containers with many, many cupcakes. And she ate a few and then left the remaining cupcakes with the plastic container. Right now, when she's leaving, there is a garbage pail that she could have just thrown it. She left it there. So I looked at her and I said, excuse me, you don't think that maybe you can put this away? And she basically, at the time, I was heavier, so she called me a fat whatever. And she started insulting my son who had long hair. And I looked at her and I said, you genuinely are a human pig. Okay. And so now, why am I saying all this? We're going to come to empathy in a second.
Okay.
During that same summer, there was a university in Southern California that was very interested in hiring me for a professorship, a permanent professorship. now I had posted a clip on my YouTube channel where I recounted that story, that, what can drive people to engage in such ugly debauchery, right? I mean, just drop the litter in the garbage.
Yeah.
Well, when I sat down with the two colleagues at lunch who were very keen on hiring me, the female colleague, because, women are inherently more empathetic than men, looked at me in all seriousness, said, before we begin our conversation, I'd like to discuss something that's been weighing on me. I said, oh, go ahead. What is it? I look serious. She goes, well, I saw your clip that you posted, and I felt very, very uncomfortable by you using, the term human pig. I said, oh, I see. You felt more uncomfortable by me using the term human pig than about the piggish, boorish behavior of the woman who not only had littered, not only had called me a fat pig, but had also attacked my then 5-year-old son. So my very, very big academic CV did not impress her as much as me having been non-empathetic through the use of the very non-empathetic term human pig for an actual human pig. Okay, so that gives you one story. Story two, which is much shorter. A senior administrator at my home university unfollowed me on then Twitter when I then called her out on that and said, oh, I couldn't help but notice that you unfollowed me. Why is that? She said that she felt very uncomfortable when I called people imbecile on Twitter. See, that's not empathetic. Professors should not use these types of terms like imbecile. It hurts people's feelings. So when the person that I call imbecile has been attacking me for a week on end with all kinds of defamation, and I retort with imbecile, that's not becoming of a professor. She's empathetic. I'm just a Middle Eastern brute.
See, you're the one that's at fault because you used a term that made her, I love that word, uncomfortable.
Yes.
I'm sure she thought you using the word imbecile was dangerous. That's another word people like to use, is dangerous. When you, as a professor, use that term, she didn't care about the person going after you for weeks on end.
Nor did she care about the fact that I put my life on the line to defend French Canadian feminists from the dangers of Islam. Which she's a very strong academic leader who is a feminist and is from Quebec. That didn't impress her as much as the fact that I used the word imbecile. That was way too much for her. She had to unfollow me.
I have to go back to story one real quick. So at this lunch, when she said this to you and you responded, which I just wish I had been there to applaud your response publicly and loudly. How did she react to your response? I know the subject matter makes you think, wow, how am I going to sleep tonight? Sleeping is a huge problem for people these days. And it is for me too. And I have this cold going right now. I had my shoulder surgeries recently, but I want to tell you what I found that actually helps me sleep better. It is not a drug. It is not a prescription. It is a cream that I apply at bedtime. It's that simple. And look, I was a total skeptic. I'm thinking, really? You put this cream on like the insides of your forearms and you're going to sleep better? But I tried it and I was amazed. It really works. And I sleep so much better. The company is Sleep Cream. They use all natural CBD combined with the finest essential oils. I particularly like the rose. I rub it on before turning in for the evening. Sometimes I'll put it on the bottoms of my feet, insides of my forearm and elbows and wrists. That works really well for me. And I'm telling you, within minutes, it helps me relax. It allows my body to do what it's supposed to do at night, which is sleep. You can find them at sleepcream.com, CREME. Just try it for a couple nights. See if it works for you as well as it does for me. And if you don't experience better sleep, Sleep Cream will refund your purchase guaranteed, and you don't have to return anything. So go to sleepcream.com, sleepcreme.com, sleepcream.com. And for the next few weeks, use the code GAMEDAY, all one term, at checkout to get free standard shipping on your order. Game Day. Are you ready for your best sleep ever? Visit sleepcreme.com, sleep, CREME.com. How did she react to your response?
So I explained the full story, which apparently she hadn't really watched the full clip, but she just saw the title, which is still up on my YouTube channel. But so the fact that so she probably just saw the title that I called her human pig. So
right.
it de-escalated her irate, level, because it maybe seemed justifiable that I would call her human pig. So in kind of like, okay, I'll grant you a pass in that now that you've explained why you committed this linguistic genocide on this otherwise noble woman, then okay, fine, you're okay. Now, I should mention that woman, frankly, is a genuinely good person. Like, I really did like her, but it speaks to what happens when you are completely parasitized by orgiastic empathy. So
right.
Maybe now I can go back and explain the theoretical mechanism that drives suicidal empathy.
Well, these are such great examples of what you talk about in both the forthcoming book and in the current one. Here's another post that you put out that I adored. Imagine Sir Winston Churchill's famous speech to rally Britain. By the land, by the sea, we will never surrender. And now think of the British leaders governing today. It only took 80 or so years for this to happen. How do you say it?
Parasitized.
Parasitized minds, zombified by suicidal empathy, have transformed civilization's trajectory. Save this post. I'll book my flight to Stockholm at Nobel Prize. I want to play Keir Starmer's sound regarding Islamophobia. Go ahead, John. Can you roll that one now?
We've seen a devastating rise in Islamophobia, leaving people feeling fearful and unsafe in their own country. I've heard firsthand of women wearing hijab who are too scared to travel by public transport, of Muslim families being abused as they leave the mosque. The surge in Islamophobia is simply appalling. Muslim women and girls disproportionately targeted, mosques forced to ramp up security, and British Muslims questioned as if they are terrorists. I do not want Britain to be a place where British Muslims are not able to be their whole selves, where they feel they must hide or tone down who they are for fear of being attached to views that are not their own, where they're asked to apologise for the actions of people who do not act in their name. Our Britain is one where the enormous contributions of British Muslims are recognised and celebrated, their stories heard, their lives free from discrimination. As leader of the Labour Party, I am indebted to the contributions of Muslim members, activists and politicians who make our party what it is today.
Okay, I think that's plenty, John, to exemplify how Keir Starmer feels about Islamophobia in Great Britain. Has he addressed, the anti-Jewish, the anti-Semitism in Britain in the same way? Why is he so focused on Islamophobia?
Well, so there are several ways to answer this. I'll give one. To our earlier point of how people try to use simplifying heuristics to make sense of the world, the narrative of who is an oppressor and who is oppressed is one that simplifies the world for me.
Yeah.
Now, how about we always agree that Islam is always victimized, and those uppity Jews, winning 25% of all Nobel Prizes for such a minuscule community, they're assholes. They're overachievers. Probably the Nobel Committee is probably run by Zionists, because what else could explain that those uppity, smarmy assholes could be winning so many Nobel Prizes? So Jews, with their really, really mean Zionist tanks, are attacking helpless children who only have a slingshot. That's an easy way for me to see the world. There are really mean ogre Jews. And there is Islam, which has always been peaceful, tolerant, and kind. And proof of that is that we left Lebanon as Lebanese Jews because we were very, very afraid of all of the love that was being purveyed on us. So our leaving Lebanon was a manifestation of our internalized Islamophobia, as was the case when my grandparents left Syria, as was the case when Muslims exterminated my wife's family in the Armenian genocide, as was the case when my brother-in-law's parents left Alexandria in Egypt because of their internalized Islamophobia. So any pattern that I give you from the past 1400 years, even when it involves, say, the killing of 80 million Hindus by Muslim conquerors, proves that Islam is the victim and the other ones are. So even when your head is decapitated by the Islamic sword of peace, it is your head that attacked the sword. The sword was the victim. Now, I say this with a tsunami of sarcasm because that's the only way that you could handle that level of parasitic thinking, right? Go back and read what Winston Churchill said about Islam. Just go back and read it. I won't replay it here. So something must have happened between the time of Winston Churchill saying whatever he said about Islam and what this guy is saying about Islamophobia. That's what happens when, number one, your cognitive system is parasitized, hence the parasitic mind, and when your emotional system is parasitized, hence suicidal empathy.
It's a little terrifying, I got to be honest with you, and I just wonder, you are a happy warrior. You're at the mountaintop screaming this. It's amazing that people. Why don't people want to hear this, Gad?
Because the reflex is that it is gauche to criticize someone's religion. Number one, right? To criticize communism feels okay because that is a socio-political economic ideology. And, if you criticize socialism or communism, hey, some people like capitalism, some people love communism, let's debate it. That seems okay. But as the old adage says, never discuss politics, never discuss religion. So in the West, we have been inculcated with the idea that proper people, good people, empathetic people never criticize someone else's belief system, except that the West, in a sense, violates that because it is perfectly okay to criticize every other religion. There is one, though, that you should never criticize because that religion is just made up of hapless victims. By the way, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the OIC, which is made up of 56 countries plus the Palestinian territories, each of those countries once upon a time had zero Islam in it. But then you close your eyes and you open your eyes and those societies become 99%, 100% Islamic. How did that happen? Did every one of those societies only get Islamized by the distribution of candy? Or does the sword of Islam have a sword precisely because maybe colonialism, maybe supremacist conquering is what led to those societies becoming Islamized? So we can criticize the Jews for their colonialism in Israel, but it wasn't colonialism when Islam conquered 56 countries. That's the problem. So that as long as the West has this innate reflex to never criticize only one group of people, you will lose the battle.
I'm still don't understand. Does it have to do with, I've heard people say, look, in the West, the United States, in Israel, the entrepreneurial spirit, the success rate, you talk about the Nobel laureates, the ambition, the materialism, the success, all those things make them more the oppressor, if you will, or the successful people, you got to blame them, because it's the people without all of that. And it's not for want of brain cells. I think it's for want of self-oppression. I don't know. I don't know this. I'm hoping you can steer me.
Well, but that's why, by the way, that's why the Islamophilic folks is, so we hear Islamophilia, but we hear Islamophobia, but Islamophilia is just an orgiastic love of Islam, right? So many people in the West just have a reflex of all things Islamophilic. Well, the reason why those folks go to bed with the leftist progressives is because both agree that there is something wrong inherently with the West, right? Now, of course, the leftists don't realize that once, we get rid of the evil capitalist, we get rid of the West, you're next on the chopping blocks, right? They don't know that, right? I mean, that's why Queers for Palestine could actually be a real thing, right? I mean, it's difficult to imagine that human beings can be so void of any neuronal activity in their brain, right? I mean, think about, just for a second, Queers for Palestine, right? If I present myself to the world with the first marker being my queerness, hey, more power to you, be queer, that's great. Do you think that you should put your sign and your hashtag behind Tel Aviv, which is one of the most queer-friendly places in the world? I mean, short of San Francisco, short of New York, short of Montreal, Tel Aviv is probably one of the global centers of, being pro-queer and so on. So if I am queer, should I have hashtag Tel Aviv for queers? Or should I put all of my marbles on the side of Gaza, where they have a very, very effective conversion therapy? It's a gravity-based conversion therapy program, right? It's 100% guaranteed to cure you of your queerness. But that's what happens when your mind is parasitized. That's why I use the neuroparasitic framework. Now, let me just explain to your listeners who don't know why I use the term parasitic. In nature, the field of parasitology studies the interaction between parasites and their hosts. Now, many parasites don't go to the brain of the host. So, for example, a tapeworm parasitizes your intestinal tract. A neuroparasite, though, seeks to end up in the host's brain, altering its neuronal circuitry to suit its interest. So, for example, a wood cricket abhors water. It doesn't want to go into water. When it is parasitized by a hairworm, the hairworm, in order for it to complete its reproductive cycle, it needs to get the wood cricket to happily and haplessly jump in water to its suicide. And that's exactly what a parasitized wood cricket does. It jumps into the water, happily committing suicide in the service of the neuroparasite called the hairworm. So when I put up a sign that says Queer for Palestine, I'm the helpless and hapless wood cricket. Hence, that's why I use the parasitic framework.
People can't be this stupid, can they? Well, I know how uncertain things are feeling. Still prices up, markets unpredictable. You continue to hear whispers about what's going on in North Korea, World War III, potentially, like many of you. I wanted to know how to prepare my portfolio for turbulent times like these. And that led me to learn more about American independence gold. Gold and silver have historically stood the test of time through wars, through recessions and market crashes. They're not just investments. They represent stability and peace of mind for families like mine. And right now, I'm holding a gold bar from American Independence Gold in my hands. It's real, it's heavy, and it could be yours when you open a gold IRA with $10,000 or more. American Independence Gold is a veteran-owned company that supports our military families and first responders. Plus, they cover custodial fees for life on qualifying accounts. So take your first step toward diversifying your portfolio today with American Independence Gold. Here's how you do it. Text the word gold to 717767. for a free investment guide. Again, text GOLD to 717767. Discover how gold and silver could fit into your portfolio with American Independence Gold. Text GOLD to 717767 and do it now. People can't be this stupid, can they?
It's fun. I love how incredulous you are. And as the author of The Parasitic Mind, who has spent 30 plus years screaming from the top of the mountain, I'm just as incredulous as you are, right? I mean, you would think that I have built in an inoculation against being incredulous, that, okay, I get it. No, that's why every day I can't walk away from Twitter or X, because I simply can't believe the stuff that people post, right? And so, for example, how could it be that when it comes to the issue of the industrial scale level rape of 250,000 children in Britain, anyone could have the sense of fighting against people who are calling the gang rape of children out? How could that be possible, right? I mean, you would think that if there is one issue on which, irrespective of your faith, irrespective of your gender identity, we could all say, we could all band together and say, gang rape of children, that's probably not a good thing. No, I can go on right now on X and show you a million tweets where people attack me because Jeffrey Epstein was a Jew. So why is it that you're focusing on Ahmed and Muhammad when Epstein, and by the way, Professor Saad, I'm sure that you must have been on Epstein Island, right?
Oh,
so
God.
Imagine that people could have such a broken moral compass that we can't come together in calling out the gang rape of children. It's unbelievable.
It truly is surreal. And in spite of the fact that we can say, and we can probably trace this back millennia, I feel like we're living in a very upside down world right now, more so than when I was growing up. Maybe it's because I'm wiser and more mature that I'm just seeing it, or maybe it really is freaking crazy. I mean, I don't know. What do you see?
So, okay, there are two parts to answering this question. The capacity for the human mind to be parasitized is eternal.
Okay.
So that part is not specific to today's era. But hold on, I'm coming to part two. So, for example, there was a time where people thought it was a very good idea. I think that Nancy over there is a witch. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to throw her into a body of water. And if she swims, then this proves that she is a witch. And of course, we'll burn her then. And if she drowns, then oops, I guess we were wrong. And Nancy wasn't a witch. That wasn't a long time ago. That was only a couple of centuries ago. And we actually thought that that was a really good idea. So I can give you another 13 trillion examples of absolute insanity throughout human history. So the capacity for human minds to be parasitized by insanity is certainly not specific to this period. But to your point, Michelle, the specific parasitic ideas that today have flourished causes it to be a unique moment in human history. You follow what I'm saying?
Yes.
So when you take postmodernism, for example, postmodernism, the reason why I call it the greatest of all idea pathogens, the granddaddy of idea pathogens, because it is the intellectual terrorism that allows all of the other nonsense to flourish. Why?
Okay.
Because postmodernism purports that there are no objective truths other than the one objective truth that there are no objective truths, right? So therefore, if I buy into this idea that there literally is no capital T truth, then of course some women could have 9-inch penises because there is no truth. I am not bound by this genitalia truth or this chromosome truth or this hormonal truth or this Charles Darwin truth about the fact that human beings come as a sexually reproducing species with two phenotypes called male to female. That's why the Canadian Senate in 2017 had to call Professor Gad Saad and Professor Jordan Peterson to appear and provide expert testimony to the fact that no, there really is such a thing as male and female. Because until 15 minutes ago, the 117 billion people, that's a real estimate. There has been roughly 117 billion people who have existed as Homo sapiens throughout human history. They seem to be able to very, very, very accurately navigate through the conundrum of what is male or female. That's how male and females were able to reproduce as our ancestors. But 15 minutes ago, we lost that ability because then, and that's why your current, I say yours because I'm not American, but frankly, I should be an honorary American yesterday.
Yes, you should.
Okay.
I agree.
Thank you. Your justice, your most recent addition to the Supreme Court did not have the epistemological confidence to give an answer when she was asked by the senator, what's your definition of a woman? I mean, I don't know. I'm not a biologist. Really? That's one of the 9 people who's going to adjudicate cases involving male and female? So that's what happens when human minds are parasitized. And frankly, and if you forgive the immodesty, that's why The Parasitic Mind became such an international bestseller, because that's what explains this complete jump into the abyss of infinite lunacy.
Infinite lunacy. God, I hope not. I want to ask you about this before we wrap.
Sure.
You talk about biophobia, and I hadn't heard this term before I read The Parasitic Mind. It's fear of biology and explaining human phenomena. And this relates back to what you were saying, has been a recurring form of science denialism that I've experienced throughout my academic career. Biophobia, like fear of biology in explaining human phenomena.
Yes.
What's the root of that? Is it postmodernism, the root of that?
Yeah. No, actually, that one came before postmodernism.
Okay.
So the reason why I mentioned this in The Parasitic Mind is because that was my first exposure to parasitic thinking as an academic. Because for your viewers and listeners who may not know this, my scientific research is in the application of evolutionary psychology and evolutionary biology to study human behavior in general and consumer behavior in particular. That's why I'm housed in a business school, right? So, so our hormones affect our food behavior, right? The average 3-day-old squirrel knows this, but all of my super smart academic colleagues think that that's really a corrosive idea, because biology matters in explaining the behavior of your dog, of the giraffe, of mosquitoes, but surely biology cannot explain the behavior of human beings. We transcend our biology. We are cultural beings, right? Now, those ideas originally developed close to 100 years ago by a Jewish anthropologist. I only say this facetiously because whenever someone who is anti-Semitic wants to be a Jew hater, they will point to some Jewish idiot who purported some stupid thing, and then they say, you see, all of those parasitic ideas come from Jews. But what about the fact that I'm the guy who wrote The Parasitic Mind and I'm also Jewish? That doesn't count. I'm not really a Jew, right?
No.
Well, so Franz Boas was a cultural anthropologist about 100 years ago at Columbia University. Him and his gang basically thought, so to answer your question in a very long-winded professorial way, he thought that because biology in the wrong hand can lead to really nefarious outcomes, well, let's create a new understanding of human behavior that leaves biology out. So what does that mean? Eugenicists used biological arguments. I mean, used in quotes, used, right? I'm speaking now as if I were a eugenicist. Let's not allow too many Sicilians into the United States because they look like they're a bit darker skinned. So maybe through either more control immigration, or maybe we just sterilize them, then we at least can make sure that they don't promulgate their genes. Or maybe let's do that to gays. And that's just a Darwinian thing. Of course, it has nothing to do with Darwin, right? Because all that Darwinian theory does is it explains how species come about, right? But because eugenicists took biological ideas to support their insanity, because the Nazis took Darwinian ideas and said, hey, it's a natural struggle between the races. We're the Aryans. Sorry, Jews. Sorry, homosexuals. Sorry, gypsies, right? You lost in the grand struggle. Hey, that's just Darwinians. Off to the chambers you go. Because British social class elitists in the 19th century made similar arguments. We are the royal class. You're in your squalor in the lower classes. If you all die of tuberculosis, well, that's just Darwinian. That's just nature, culling out the bad folks. So because all kinds of cretins and morons misused evolutionary theory in the pursuit of their political goals, some really empathetic and kind academics came along and said, let's create a new reality where we can stop the likelihood of biology ever being misused, hence biophobia, fear of using biology. But in what world can you study every single species using biology except one species called Homo sapiens? It's insane. So that was my first exposure to parasitic thinking 30 plus years ago. And it's been a dance with the idiots ever since.
Yeah. I just
Where's
don't
my
know.
Nobel Prize, Michelle?
It's long overdue. That's for one. Long overdue. I would book a flight to Stockholm though if I were you, because it's just someday. That's
Oh, by the way, the
yeah.
good news is if I go to Sweden, I will feel completely comfortable because the native tongue of Sweden is Arabic and my mother tongue is Arabic. So I'll feel right at home in Sweden.
You won't feel uncomfortable and you won't feel like you're in danger, which is key to a good life from what I hear.
Exactly.
This is, I could talk to you for hours and we don't have hours, but I just so marvel at the way that you, what I love is the way that you put this stuff in terms that people can go, well, yeah, hell yeah. And I just hope more and more and more. And yeah, you know what? I think I am going to go buy a bunch of copies of The Parasitic Mind and ship them out to people that I know who really need to read it. The Parasitic Mind, The Parasitic Mind, The Parasitic Mind. Buy it for everyone that you know. Buy it for your kids. Buy it for your college age kids. Last thing for you, because, and I know you're a happy warrior, but genuinely, what gives you hope about your work and the future, that things could get less insane?
So in an abstract sense, I like to think that truth will always win out. The problem is that you can get to truth in a day and forestall a lot of violence. We will get to truth in 40 years, but then the reaction of people will cause a lot more violence to autocorrect, right? So what I'm basically saying is there's a long arc of history and decency and truth eventually win out, but the path to getting there can either be a nice promenade or it could be rivers of blood. And so over the long haul, I always like to think that it autocorrects in the right direction. But in the shorter time period, there's a lot of bumps in the road. So that's the only way that I'm able to get up every morning and feel optimistic, knowing that truth is on my side, the silent majority is on my side, and it is my job to awaken their courage so that hopefully we can win this tomorrow rather than in 50 years.
Awaken their courage. That's I end every show by saying, be brave, do good. For that reason, we cannot cower in this time. We cannot. We've got to be outspoken. We've got to stand up for this stuff. Does it give you hope that, you've seen Trump elected over one of the worst candidates we've ever seen in American history, and that Trudeau, like, it seems to me like maybe there's these winds of change. Trudeau resigns. He knows he's in trouble. He knows his party, I think, is in trouble. Is that a hopeful trend?
It's hopeful in the short run, to my
Okay.
previous point, meaning
Okay.
that, look, had Kamala Harris won, had Trudeau stayed then it's only going to worsen things.
Mhm.
So is there a tremendous reason to be happy? Absolutely. But remember that it took, depending on the parasitic idea, 50 to 100 years for these parasitic ideas to originally be spawned on university campuses, to
Right.
then break out of the ivory tower, to then infect every nook and cranny of society. So it's not going to magically disappear because Donald Trump ascended to the highest office, right?
Right.
He's certainly going to reverse a lot of the insanity, but he's only around for 4 years. So the bigger battle is to make sure, right? I mean, the only way you get rid of polio is literally if you eradicate polio, right?
Right.
I mean, you have to have a vaccine program that is so exhaustive that there are no longer any pockets of live polio going around in any
Right.
ecosystem. Well, you need to do that with parasitized minds and with the reflex of suicidal empathy. So yes, I'm optimistic that this massive autocorrection called Donald Trump is now in place, but it's going to be much longer battle than Donald Trump.
Keep fighting it. Because you've got a lot of people, Gad. I know you know that. Now you've passed a million on X, and I love that your family gave you a cake. That was adorable. All that, so people are listening, and that should keep you hopeful as well. He is Gad Saad. You can find him. We're going to put everything in the show notes. Plus, you've been seeing Lower Thirds. Follow him on X. It is a great follow. Get his book, The Parasitic Mind, and cross your fingers that the next one, Suicidal Empathy, comes out sooner than later. We cannot wait. And honestly, we can't wait. You know, I mean that in a very literal sense. It's been great to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle. It's a pleasure talking to you anytime.